So I don't think whether it was given by abundance, in the case of God, bonum divusivum sui, or by making a sacrifice, as we say, makes really a difference. We claim the right to use the vocabulary of sacrifice unduly, to my opinion, indeed. I referred to this illegitimate use of sacrifice to emphasize the following point. We cannot say that the question of sacrifice has no more any validity in a situation of postmodern death of God and all that rhetoric. That, as it was studied by Mauss, by the sociology of religion first, that sacrifice pertains only to primitive, so-called primitive societies, as if there were no room left for the question of sacrifice, as if the question of sacrifice could be provisional for us and not compulsory. It is a question we cannot avoid. We have kept the rhetoric of sacrifice because even in the extreme and unjustified case of terrorism, we do experience the meaning of making something no more profane but sacred. Violence and terrorism, at least, remain the indication that the issue of sacrifice cannot be dodged, cannot be sacrificed, and that we have to face that. And the fact that we have now a very weak concept of sacrifice is a good indication that, by the same way, we have a very weak concept of gift. What is very strange, if you read Mauss and the literature after coming from Marcel Mauss, is not only, as I've noticed earlier, that they identify the gift and the exchange, which is quite surprising, but that when they try to understand sacrifice as well, according to the same logic, the logic of the exchange, they give no clear understanding of the core of the sacrifice in their own interpretation. Their interpretation is that sacrifice as the gift is an exchange, and there is a contract. So I give for free something to the divinity, so I have a contract with the divinity which should give me something back. But the experience of sacrifice, as well as the experience of the gift, is precisely that it is not enough to give it away, to have a gift accomplished or a sacrifice accomplished, because a part of the experience of the gift sacrifice that both of them can be rebuked, despised. So, in fact, in the traditional usual understanding of sacrifice as a deal, as a contract, of which the price may be the death, the putting to death someone, in this usual understanding, not only it is a bit, how to say that, disgusting to imagine sacrifice that way, but it is also irrational, because there is no explanation given. We just suppose that there is an implicit contract between the divinity, the divine, and those making the sacrifice. But precisely, the definition of the contract is that there is no implicit contract. A contract is explicit or is not. So any interpretation of sacrifice through the exchange, that is through the contract, is in fact an illusion of explanation. It's not only unfair and a bit brutal, but it is simply irrational. So the same way that I have the impression that the phenomenology of the gift should be re-explained against this interpretation as an exchange, as well for the phenomenology of sacrifice, which is in no way an exchange. There is no suppression nothing is suppressed in the sacrifice. It is exactly the reverse. something is seen for the first time. That is, the bare thing seen for the first time as coming from the process of givenness. So sacrifice is a phenomenological operation of shedding light upon an previously obscured and forgotten phenomenon, the gift itself.
What difference in your judgment does this really fascinating phenomenology of gift and givenness related to now a new understanding of phenomenology of sacrifice, to my knowledge quite original phenomenology of sacrifice related to gift and givenness, what difference, if any, does this make in your last example on Genesis 22 on Abraham and Isaac for the centuries-old discussions in Judaism on the Akedah, as it's called, in Christianity, especially perhaps since Kierkegaard, or Levinas's rejection of Kierkegaard, on what might be called the ethical dilemma in the famous Genesis 22 that many have highlighted, either like Kierkegaard or in a directly contrary, in fact contradictory way, Levinas and others. Does it make a difference, this new phenomenology, for the ethical issues that seem involved?
I cannot answer that question because it is too central and too heavy, so to speak. But what I could say is that most of the time, the understanding of sacrifice is based either on the contractual explanation, which was opposed, for instance, of to the traditional reading of Anselm Cur Deus Homo, which is supposed to be the example of a contractual view of sacrifice, or in other cases, a moral view of sacrifice. What makes a difference to me, obviously, is that there is indeed a phenomenology of sacrifice even in the text of Genesis 22. The fact that Yira, which is used twice to name the mountain where the sacrifice is, Mountain Moriah, and to say that God will give what is needed for the impossible sacrifice. God will foresee for that, see for that. This is Moriah twice. It is translated in the Greek, at least I've discovered that, by two different translations. In the first case, they translate it is God will give Abraham what is needed. God foresees, and the second, that is the name of the mountain, is God foresees. And the second case, it is God appears, ofte, which is in fact in the New Testament the language to describe the resurrection of Christ, any theophany. God ofte. And it is the same Hebrew word, Yira. As if the only way for God to appear would precisely be to give. God appears when the gift of God is clearly seen. And in the case of Abraham going to the mountain to make the sacrifice, it is just to make clear that Isaac is not his possession, but the gift of God. That is to see God through Isaac again. That's the point. When Sarah claims, as Abraham is a banquet, that this is my son, through Isaac, God is no more seen. The gift of God has completely disappeared. So there is the claim for dispossession to make Isaac not to be suppressed, but to be seen as what it is, that is to say, the gift of God. And by accepting not to own anymore Isaac, Abraham makes clearly God appear as the truth, so to speak, of the fact that Isaac is given. And so God appears again. So we have, I would say, even in the biblical narrative, you can say this is about the visibility of God, without referring to other possible scheme of explanation. I don't discuss them for the moment, an ethical one in different meaning or a contractual one. But there is also the fact that we can see the gift without the process of givenness, not only about the giver, but the process of givenness, or we can see we have a double phenomenality, so to speak, of the gift given, that is, its own face, and the process of the giving by what, in fact, in classical phenomenology, we mean by the fact that the signification could be an invice, referring the signification to another signification. That could be exactly the case. And in that case, we are, strictly speaking, a phenomenological interpretation of sacrifice.